You think being a cartel boss is all gold plated AK-47s, private islands, and unlimited power. In reality, it is a life of constant, grinding paranoia that ends in one of two ways: a concrete cell or a shallow grave. Forget the movies, forget the romanticized aesthetic of the narco culture. Let's look at the actual mechanics of running a multi-billion-dollar criminal empire. It starts with the myth of the kingpin. We picture a man sitting on a throne, ordering hits with a snap of his fingers. But look at El Chapo. Joaquin Guzman Loera didn't spend his days sipping tequila. He spent his days in tunnels, in mountains, and in constant transit. To be a boss is to be a ghost. You cannot live in a house. You cannot use a phone. You cannot trust your own reflection. The moment you stay in one place for more than 48 hours, your life expectancy drops to near zero. The first rule of survival is compartmentalization. As a boss, you never see the product, you never see the money. You operate through layers of intermediaries. You are a CEO of a logistical nightmare. You have to move tons of cocaine, fentanyl, and meth across the most heavily monitored borders on the planet. This requires a supply chain that rivals Amazon. You need chemists, pilots, tunnel engineers, and corrupt officials. Every single link in that chain is a point of failure. If one pilot gets spooked and talks, the whole structure collapses. If one police chief decides to take a bribe from a rival instead of you, your territory is compromised. Being a boss isn't about leadership, it is about constant damage control. Let's talk about the money. This is the biggest misconception. You don't have a bank account, you have a mountain of cash that is actively rotting. Literally. Cartel bosses store millions of dollars in walls, underground bunkers, and plastic barrels. Cash is a liability. It gets damp, it gets eaten by rats, and it smells like mildew. You have to launder it, which means you are constantly losing 20 to 30% of your profit just to turn physical bills into usable assets. You are surrounded by paper, yet you are effectively broke because you cannot spend it without triggering a red flag. Then there is the violence. People think bosses are the ones pulling the triggers. They aren't. They are the ones paying for the consequences of a failing system. When you are at the top, you are the ultimate arbiter of life and death, but that power is a cage. If you are too soft, your subordinates see weakness and start a coup. If you are too brutal, you bring the full heat of the state or the DEA down on your organization. Look at the fall of the Zetas. They started as elite special forces and turned into the most violent cartel in history. Their boss, Heriberto Lascano, essentially forced the government's hand. By overplaying their brutality, they turned themselves into the primary target of the entire Mexican military. They didn't win, they were dismantled. Being a boss is a balancing act of fear. You must be feared enough to keep order, but not so feared that the state decides you are an existential threat that must be erased. The internal pressure is even worse. You are surrounded by ambitious people who are waiting for you to make a mistake. There is no retirement plan in a cartel. You don't get a golden watch and a pension. You get a bullet from the person sitting next to you who thinks they can do your job better. Consider the history of the Cali cartel. They were the chess players. They used sophisticated communication networks and focused on bribery over bloodshed. They seemed invincible. They ran a professional business, and yet they still ended up in prison for decades. Even when you play the game perfectly, you lose. You are fighting against the entire global security apparatus: the United States, the Mexican government, rival cartels, and your own people. The math is never in your favor. The lifestyle is also fundamentally incompatible with humanity. You cannot have friends. You cannot have a family life that isn't under the constant shadow of a potential kidnapping or assassination. Your children are targets. Your spouses are witnesses. You are trading every meaningful human connection for a seat at the head of a table that everyone is trying to flip. There is a strange, dark irony to the life of a cartel boss. They build empires that move billions of dollars, but they live in the dirt. They command thousands of soldiers, but they are terrified of the dark. They are the architects of chaos, yet their own lives are dictated by the movements of law enforcement and the shifting alliances of other monsters. Ultimately, the position of a cartel boss is a high-speed collision course with oblivion. It is not a career choice, it is a terminal illness. Every day you remain at the top, you are just waiting for the inevitable moment when the power dynamic shifts and your existence becomes a liability for someone else. Is that level of power worth the total loss of self? You aren't a man anymore. You are a target with a price tag. You are a ghost moving through a world that wants you dead. We see the flash, the jewelry, and the bravado on social media, but behind the camera, there is just a person, trapped in a cold room, waiting for the sound of boots at the door. In this business, the only thing you truly own is your fear, and the longer you stay, the more that fear becomes your only companion. When the empire falls, and it always falls, what remains isn't a legacy, it's just another name in a police report, another footnote in a war that never ends. Is the throne worth the price of never having a moment of peace again? Most kings of the underworld would give anything to be a regular man, but by the time they realize it, the door is already locked from the outside.